The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with extravagance, crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed place settings, and flower arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I adjusted my simple blue dress, purchased off the rack at Macy's, feeling distinctly out of place among the designer gowns and custom tuxedos. Sophia. My mother's sharp whisper cut through the pre-wedding chaos. Why aren't you dressed properly? I told you Isabella's wedding is black tie. I smoothed out my dress, fighting back the familiar feeling of inadequacy. This is all I could afford, Mom. Teaching salaries aren't exactly generous. She pressed her lips together, disappointment evident in every line of her face. We offered to help you buy something appropriate if you just accepted your father's job offer at the company. I don't want to work in corporate finance, I interrupted, an argument we'd had countless times. I love teaching. My students need me. And look where that noble choice has gotten you. She gestured at my outfit. While your sister is marrying the CEO of Morgan Industries, you can't even dress properly for her wedding. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to tell her exactly who owned Morgan Industries. The truth that not even my sister's precious fiancé James knew, that his company's majority shareholder was actually a private investment firm, my investment firm. The path that led me here started 10 years ago, when I was fresh out of college. Like Isabella, I've been offered a position at our father's investment company, the safe, expected choice. But I couldn't imagine spending my life moving money around for wealthy clients, caring only about profit margins and portfolio growth. Instead, I chose to teach mathematics at an underfunded public high school in the Bronx. My father had been furious, my mother disappointed, and Isabella. Well, she made sure everyone knew how she felt about her sister's downgrade in life. What they didn't know was that teaching was only half of my story. During my second year of teaching, I noticed something troubling. Many of my brightest students came from families struggling to make ends meet. Their parents worked multiple jobs, yet still struggled with predatory loans and mounting debt. The financial system was rigged against them, and traditional banks weren't interested in helping. That's when I had my idea. Using my savings and my knowledge of finance, I did graduate with honors in economics after all. I started a small investment consulting firm. But unlike my father's company, which catered to the wealthy, I focused on helping working-class families manage debt, build savings, and invest wisely. The first year was brutal. I worked full-time as a teacher, then spent evenings and weekends building my company. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, ate ramen noodles, and poured every spare penny into growing the business. My family, of course, saw none of this. They only saw what I showed them. The dedicated teacher in modest clothes, living a simple life. Isabella especially loved to highlight the contrast between us. Look at Sophia, so noble with her teaching, she'd say at family gatherings. I could never sacrifice luxury like that. I prefer success. But my little consulting firm grew beyond anything they could imagine. Word spread through the communities I helped. Success stories multiplied. Families who thought they'd never escape debt were building wealth. Single mothers were sending their kids to college. Immigrant families were buying their first homes. I reinvested every profit, expanding into micro-lending, then ethical investment funds. I hired other teachers, social workers, and community advocates who shared my vision. We opened offices in other cities, always operating under the radar, focused on helping people rather than flaunting wealth. 5 years in, my company, Phoenix Capital, had become one of the largest private investment firms in the country. Though few knew who actually owned it, I maintained my teaching job, not out of necessity, but because I loved it. My students kept me grounded, reminded me why I'd started this journey in the first place. Then came the opportunity I hadn't expected. Morgan Industries, a company known for predatory lending practices in low-income communities, was facing a hostile takeover. Through a series of strategic moves, Phoenix Capital acquired a controlling interest. James Morgan, the young CEO, never realized that the quiet teacher who would become his sister-in-law was actually his boss. Sophia. Isabella's voice jerked me back to the present. My sister stood in her $50,000 wedding dress, looking like a princess in a fairy tale. What are you wearing? Please tell me that's not from a department store. You look beautiful, Isabella, I said, avoiding her question. She sighed dramatically. Well, I suppose it doesn't matter. No one will be looking at you anyway. She turned to adjust her veil in a nearby mirror. James says Morgan Industries is about to announce some major changes, We'll be even wealthier soon. Maybe I'll buy you a proper wardrobe as a charity case." If she only knew that I'd signed those major changes into effect yesterday. A complete overhaul of the company's lending practices, millions in community reinvestment, and a new board of directors focused on ethical banking. The wedding ceremony was exactly as extravagant as Isabella had planned. When James said his vows, promising to love and cherish my sister, I wondered if he'd feel the same way when he discovered his company's new direction tomorrow morning. At the reception, I sat at the family table, picking at an overpriced meal while Isabella held court. She clinked her crystal champagne glass, calling for attention. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming to celebrate our perfect day," she gushed. "James and I represent the joining of two great business dynasties, the Morgans and the Levins, united in success and prosperity." Her eyes found me at the table. And of course, I must mention my dear sister Sophia. She couldn't quite manage the family business track. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. But she's found her own, modest path. Not all of us are meant for greatness, after all. More laughter. I saw my father nod in agreement, my mother hide her embarrassment behind her champagne glass. In fact, Isabella continued, clearly enjoying herself. "Sophia's actually inspired our first act of charity as a married couple. James and I will be donating to her little school. It's important to help the less fortunate, isn't it, darling?" James raised his glass, smiling magnanimously. "Absolutely, my love. Though I must point out, Morgan Industries already has quite an extensive charitable giving program." I almost choked on my water. The charitable giving program he meant was actually a tax evasion scheme I discovered during the takeover. That would be ending tomorrow too. I checked my phone under the table. An email from my CEO had just arrived. All preparations complete. Press release scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow. Board meeting to follow at 9 a.m. James Morgan's termination letter ready for your signature. I looked up at my sister and her new husband, still basking in their moment of glory. In less than 12 hours, their perfect world would shatter. James would learn that his company now belonged to Phoenix Capital, that his charitable giving program was under federal investigation, that his new board of directors had voted unanimously to remove him as CEO. And eventually, they would all learn that the modest teacher they'd mocked for so long was actually one of the most powerful women in finance. I stood up quietly, gathering my purse. My mother frowned. "Where are you going? They haven't even cut the cake." "I have an early meeting tomorrow," I said truthfully. "Important school business." Isabella rolled her eyes. "Oh yes, must rush home to grade papers. How thrilling." I hugged her carefully, mindful of her expensive dress. "Congratulations, sister dear. Tomorrow will certainly be interesting." The next morning, I arrived at my classroom early, just like any other day. My students' algebra tests sat neatly stacked on my desk, waiting to be graded. But today was anything but ordinary. My phone buzzed at exactly 8 a.m. The news alerts started rolling in. Morgan Industries, ANUNC's major restructuring, James Morgan out as CEO, MIDETHL concerns, Phoenix Capital, REVEAL's Kiwantirolling STK in Morgan Industries. I was halfway through grading my first test when the call started. Isabella first, her voice shrill and panicked. "Sophia, something terrible is happening. James is, she dissolved into tears. "What's wrong?" I asked calmly, marking another correct equation. "His company, some investment firm called Phoenix, has taken over. They're saying horrible things about the lending practices, investigating the charity funds. They fired him. We just got back from our wedding and he's been fired." I set down my red pen. "That sounds serious." "Serious?" she shrieked. "We just put a deposit down on a $12 million house. The press is outside our door. Dad's trying to handle it, but..." On cue, my father's name flashed on call waiting. "Isabella, I need to take another call. Good luck with everything." I switched lines. "Hi, Dad." "Sophia, where are you?" "We need everyone at the office immediately. This Phoenix Capital situation, it's worse than we thought. They're not just targeting Morgan Industries, they're exposing the entire network of affiliated companies. Our firm's stock is dropping." Of course it was. I'd spent years mapping the web of connections between my father's company and various predatory lending schemes. "I'm teaching Dad." I have a class in 20 minutes. Teaching? Your sister's life is falling apart. Our family's reputation is at stake. And you're worried about teaching? My students have a test next period, I said firmly. I'll come by after school. I hung up as my first period class started filing in. Maria, one of my brightest students, placed a newspaper on my desk. Miss L, isn't that your brother-in-law's company in the headlines? I smiled. Focus on your test, Maria. Sometimes life has more important lessons than algebra. By lunch break, my phone had over 50 missed calls. The latest news updates were even more intense. Phoenix Capital ANN of UNC is $500 million calmamente regan v estime anti program. Morgan Industries 2FORJV Predatori OANs. Mysterious fate Phoenix Capital FOUNDA. Wall Street's Robin Hood. Then came the text I'd been waiting for. From James himself. Need to meet with Phoenix Capital founder immediately. Willing to negotiate. Please ask your father if he has connections. I replied simply, check your email. The email I'd sent him contained just 2 attachments. A photo of me at my desk at Phoenix Capital's headquarters, and his final severance agreement. His response came seconds later. This is impossible. I'll see you at the board meeting at 2 p.m. I wrote back, don't be late. I taught my afternoon classes as usual, watching my students work through quadratic equations while my phone continuously buzzed with family drama. At 1:45, I asked my department head to cover my last period and drove to Phoenix Capital's downtown headquarters. The boardroom fell silent as I walked in, still wearing my teacher's clothes, a simple blouse and skirt. James, his face ashen, sat between his lawyers. My father occupied a chair near the door, apparently having pulled strings to attend this meeting. What is she doing here? James demanded. I took my seat at the head of the table. Mr. Morgan, I believe you wanted to meet with Phoenix Capital's founder. Well, here I am. The look on my father's face was indescribable. James jumped to his feet. This is a joke. You're a teacher. I'm both actually, I said, opening my laptop. Now, shall we discuss the terms of your departure? And Dad, you might want to stay. Your company's audit is next. Sophia, my father's voice shook. What have you done? Created change, I replied. Something you taught me about, remember? Though probably not the kind you meant. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, James had signed his resignation. My father had aged 10 years, and Phoenix Capital's new community-focused initiatives were firmly in place. As everyone filed out, my father lingered. Why? He asked simply. Remember Tommy Martinez? I asked. He looked blank. No, he was my student 5 years ago. His mother worked 3 jobs but still lost their house because of Morgan Industries' predatory loans. Or Maria Gonzalez's family, who lost their business because of our family firm's aggressive investment strategies. I stood up, gathering my teaching materials. I chose to teach because I wanted to help people. But I built Phoenix Capital because I wanted to change the system that was hurting them. Your sister's wedding, he began. Isabella will be fine. I cut in. The prenup she signed protects her. She'll still be wealthy, just not through exploiting others. Later that evening, my doorbell rang. Isabella stood there, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. I let her in, knowing how small she looked without her designer armor. Would you have treated me differently if you knew I was rich? Of course. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. She sank onto my couch, looking around my modest apartment with new eyes. I don't understand. You could live in a mansion, drive expensive cars. I have those things, I said quietly. I just don't need to show them off. My work, both as a teacher and through Phoenix, actually helps people. That's worth more than any luxury. James is furious, she said. He's talking about contesting the takeover. He can try, I shrugged. But maybe instead he could learn something. Like I did from you. She looked up, surprised. From me? What did you learn from me? That appearances can be deceiving. That people aren't always what they seem. I sat beside her. And that sometimes the person you've looked down on the most has been standing on higher ground all along. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. I've been horrible to you, she finally said. Yes, you have. Will you teach me? she asked suddenly, not about business or money, but about making a difference. I smiled, remembering the little sister who used to follow me around before money and status became her whole world. My classroom's always open. We can start tomorrow. But you're just teaching high school algebra, she said, then caught herself. I mean, just algebra, I laughed. Isabella, everything I've built started with understanding numbers. But it grew from understanding people. Maybe it's time you learn both. The next morning, I returned to my classroom. My students had no idea that their algebra teacher had just orchestrated one of the biggest corporate takeovers of the year. They didn't know that the simple black sedan I drove cost more than their parents' houses, or that I could buy the entire school district without denting my bank account. But as I watched Isabella slip quietly into the back of my classroom, designer purse replaced by a notebook and pen, I knew that some lessons were worth more than money. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest choices, like choosing to be yourself, even when the world expects something different. I turned to the whiteboard and wrote, "Today's lesson: how numbers can change the world." And for the first time in years, my sister raised her hand to learn.